Requiem dropped a bombshell in the new footage we saw at the Nintendo Showcase last week, as the victims that Grace and Leon were investigating leading up to the start of the game was revealed to be all Raccoon City survivors. This revelation blew my mind, as it completely changed everything we knew about the motivations of the heroes and the villains of the game. However, today I want to focus on a specific thing in relation to this revelation. In the trailer, Leon says the following line:
6 survivors of Raccoon City, all dead from the same thing.
This means that there are at least 6 victims at the start of the game, and each of these victims, which are people who survived the Raccoon City outbreak, died in the exact same way. Now, there's a bunch of speculation that can be made here in regards to how they all died, but based on what we've seen so far in this game, my money is on the new virus that Leon is infected with. So today we're taking a look at every single survivor of the Raccoon City outbreak that we know about, as we discuss the last known whereabouts of each of them, and which of them, if any, are likely to be any of the 6 victims mentioned in the last trailer. There are a few things I want to cover before I dive into each of the survivors on today's list. First off, I want to talk about the most recent interview from the producer of Resident Evil Requiem, Kumazawa, who answers someone's question in regards to Ada's role, if any, in Requiem. His response was that he can't confirm or deny that she's in the game, but basically this is Leon and Grace's story, and there's not many returning characters in the game, essentially telling us not to get our hopes up about too many different protagonists returning for Requiem. I bring this up because I think this is Kumazawa pretty much letting us down easy, pretty much telling us not to expect Claire, Ada, Jill, and any other person you can think of to return in this game, at least not all of them together. Still, I do think the fact that he said there's not many returning characters, and the fact that he doesn't come out and say Ada and the others aren't in the game, tells us that we might see at least 1 or 2 other returning characters. Now, the second thing I want to bring up are the 2 Raccoon City survivors confirmed to be in Requiem so far, Leon S. Kennedy and Alyssa Ashcroft. Considering the fact that Leon is the main protagonist of the game, and the fact that he's the one that literally says the line about the 6 victims being Raccoon City survivors, clearly confirms he's obviously not one of them. As for Alyssa though, even though she apparently dies in the Renwood Hotel, I don't think Leon is including her in the 6 victims list. For 2 reasons actually. Alyssa Ashcroft died 8 years prior to Leon's investigation, but more importantly, the trailers lead us to believe she was murdered by Victor Gideon. And assuming we're going with the theory that the virus Leon is infected with is the one killing Raccoon City survivors, Alyssa being murdered eliminates her as one of the 6 victims that died in the same way. So basically this means we're looking at 6 other Raccoon City survivors that were killed via this new virus, which then opens the door for who these victims could be. Do we know any of them, or are they just random Raccoon City survivors that we never met? To be fair, there's a long list of survivors that we know about, and Raccoon City is a big city with plenty of other citizens that we don't know about. It's very possible that we could just get 6 dead Raccoon City survivors that we've never heard of, but while I do think that's a very likely possibility, I'm betting at least 1 or even 2 of these survivors are people we know, even if they are minor characters from previous games as Easter eggs. Anyway, with all that out of the way, let's take a look at every single survivor of the Raccoon City incident and discuss which ones are most likely to be one of the 6 victims in Requiem. Number 1, Claire Redfield. After the Raccoon City outbreak, Claire went searching for her brother in Europe, leaving Sherry behind with Leon. Eventually, she was reunited with her brother before being separated again to pursue different paths. Instead of fighting the bioterrorism threat head-on like Chris and Leon, Claire joined TerraSafe so that she can help the victims of bioterrorism and help them return to normal lives. It was a different path that she took, and even though this path did sometimes throw her into the middle of outbreaks again and again, it was still a noble cause that she took on and different from the rest of the protagonists of the series. Following the events of Code Veronica, Claire would continue to visit Sherry Birkin as much as possible, who was now in the custody of the US government and Derek Simmons because of the G virus inside of her blood. We know Claire Redfield is alive as of 2015, still working with TerraSafe thanks to the canon CG film Death Island. My fear for Claire Redfield though, being someone that died prior to the events of Resident Evil Requiem, has slowly been building and building over the last few months. While I don't think Capcom is really considering killing off Claire off screen, I do think there's a way to handle it where it can both be impactful and satisfying, even for people that don't want to see her die. First off, the hints towards her being someone that died prior to the events of Requiem are mostly tied to Leon himself. Leon owns a watch and a gun called a Requiem. On both of these objects, there's an angel wing motif. Well, Claire Redfield has been tied to angel wings since she was first introduced. Whether it was the Made in Heaven jacket that she wore in the original RE2 or the angel wing necklace she wore in the remake, there's multiple things that connect Claire to this symbol. To make matters worse for poor Claire, the developers have confirmed that Leon carries these symbols on his possessions because it means fallen comrades, essentially confirming that Leon is honoring people he's lost in his line of work. So yeah, I can definitely see Leon honoring Claire by featuring this wing on his new gun and watch. As for if I think Capcom will kill her off screen, well, maybe, but it has to be done right. See, if they they are going to do it, it'll need to be done in a flashback sequence of some kind. Maybe we don't know who the first victim was right away until much later in the story, when Leon is talking to Grace and talking about the people that were killed with this virus, and he tells her about Claire, giving us a flashback sequence of Leon being with Claire with the virus, who is infected with it, that ultimately took her life. Yeah, I know it's a stretch, but I wouldn't be completely shocked here if Capcom decided to go this route. Still, I think there's more likely characters that will probably end up on that list over Claire, to be honest. Number 2, Sherry Birkin. Obviously, Sherry Birkin might be one of the more interesting survivors of the outbreak, because not only did she survive the outbreak thanks to Leon and Claire as a child, but she also was infected with the G virus before she left the city. And while she did receive a vaccine thanks to Claire, Sherry was left with side effects of the virus that ultimately gives her rapid healing abilities. After escaping the city, Sherry was immediately detained and placed in the US government's custody under Derek Simmons' supervision. In order to guarantee her safety, Leon joined a task force created by the government to counter bioterrorism around the world. After the death of Wesker in 2009, the biggest threat to Sherry was gone, and the government allowed her to leave confinement under the agreement that she would join the DSO. Now, she agreed, and then a few years later, Resident Evil 6 took place. After the death of Simmons, Sherry returned as an agent for the DSO and continued her work fighting the war against BOWs alongside other DSO agents, including Leon S. Kennedy and Helena Harper. Unfortunately, we don't know anything else about Sherry's whereabouts, as the last time we saw her was 2013 when RE6 took place. Now, going to Requiem, I don't think Sherry Birkin is one of the 6 victims. In fact, I can almost guarantee that she's not, for a few reasons. Firstly, with Sherry being infected with the G virus, if there was one protagonist that would be safe from a new strand or a new virus, it would probably be Sherry because of the antibodies in her blood. However, and probably more importantly, I'm extremely confident Sherry Birkin is Leon's new contact. Throughout the trailers, Leon has been talking to someone over the comms. This voice reminds me so much of Sherry's voice actress in RE6. She even appears to have the same hairstyle and hair color as Sherry Birkin if you look closely at the person on comms with Leon. Add that to the fact that most of the people who played the 3-hour demo behind closed doors are not allowed to say who this comms person is talking to Leon. Yeah, clearly Capcom is hiding something here with this person, and my money is on it being Sherry Birkin as Leon's new DSO contact. Number 3, Ada Wong. If we're talking about survivors that have the deepest connection to Leon, there's nobody more connected to him than Ada Wong. While the two of them may not have the best history with each other, they have always been there for each other when it counted. For example, Ada has saved Leon multiple times from behind the scenes, and Leon has taken bullets for Ada on multiple occasions. So yeah, clearly these two care for each other a lot, even if they often find themselves on opposite sides of each other every single time they reunite. The last known whereabouts of Ada Wong, like Sherry Birkin, goes back to 2013 and the events of RE6. After surviving the Raccoon City outbreak and retrieving a sample of the G virus for Wesker and his employers, Ada Wong became a contractor for hire, mostly working for Wesker and his rival organization 2 Umbrella. However, after the events of RE4 remake specifically, Ada Wong parted ways with Wesker as she continued her work as a freelancer for multiple different companies, most of which remain mysterious to us. Even at the end of Resident Evil 6, when she destroys Simmons' lab, she then gets a call from an unknown caller offering her a job, which she then accepts. To this day, we still don't know who that caller was or who Ada works for, but if there's one thing that we can count on, it's that she'll always be there for Leon. On that note, while I do think she'll be in Requiem to some degree, I don't know if it'll be in the form of a victim that died prior to the events of the game. While Ada Wong might not be a protagonist, like Claire Redfield, she's still an important character, and someone like her isn't likely to die by a virus off screen, especially because of her connection to Leon. This is something that has to be like a self-sacrifice moment for her character, for Leon, to save Leon potentially. Otherwise, I just don't see them killing off Ada Wong, in my opinion. Number 4, Carlos Oliveira. Before the remake of Resident Evil 3, Carlos was nowhere near as popular to fans of the series. Don't get me wrong, I've always got a good laugh out of the OG Carlos, but in comparison to the other protagonists of the series, he just didn't stack up against the likes of Chris Redfield and Leon Kennedy. However, one of the few things that the remake of RE3 did right was the improvements made to Carlos's character. He instantly became more likable, relatable, and overall he became a character that some fans out there would call their favorite one-off character now. But in terms of Carlos's story, there's not much known after the events of Raccoon City. I mean, Carlos has yet to appear in the series again, and he's not even mentioned in future games, which is kind of weird. The only bits of information that we got on Carlos and his whereabouts are thanks to files and the epilogue at the end of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, and with the current timeline appearing to lean more towards the remake timeline, I don't even know if we can call that information canon or not. Regardless, here's what we do know. After leaving Raccoon City via chopper with Jill Valentine, the two of them stopped at a bar off the coast of the United States of America somewhere. Then they split up and said their goodbyes to each other before Carlos headed headed to South America and goes into hiding while also harboring a deep hatred for Umbrella. Now, there are rumors that he may have joined the BSAA or that he got plastic surgery. Believe it or not, that's an actual rumor, but both are just fan theories at best. Anyways, on that note, as much of a fan I am of Carlos from Resident Evil 3 Remake, he actually makes for a great candidate to be one of the victims in Resident Evil Requiem, considering the fact that he has been MIA for over 28 years. No one, and I mean no one, not even Jill as far as I know, has talked to Carlos over the years. Then when you take into consideration that he worked for Umbrella and despises them, and the fact that Umbrella in some way might be behind the events of Requiem, then Carlos is a threat to them, so making sure he dies isn't completely out of the realm of possibilities. There are two saving graces for Carlos though. One, last we heard, he's in South America. According to the trailers, all the bodies so far have appeared in the United States. So unless Carlos made his way back to the US, which is possible, I don't see how he could have been one of the victims. The other problem is Jill Valentine. If Carlos is revealed to be one of the victims killed by this new virus, why the hell is Jill Valentine not getting involved? Based on the relationship in RE3, you would think that she would make this a priority to investigate his death, meaning that she would be the second main protagonist of Resident Evil Requiem, not Leon. And I doubt she'll appear in the game at this point when Capcom themselves said not to expect too many returning characters. Speaking of which, we might as well talk about her next. Number 5, Jill Valentine. Not only is Jill Valentine probably the least likely survivor of the Raccoon City incident to be one of the 6 victims killed off screen in Requiem, she's also probably one of the least likely protagonists of the series to return in this game. With Leon Kennedy being the second playable protagonist and Capcom pretty much stating that Grace and Leon are the only main playable characters, there's absolutely no way that Capcom will bring Jill back only to then be a side character at best after not being a main playable character for a Resident Evil game since Revelations. Well, outside of a remake and the DLCs, that is. Also, Jill's story is a long one, and it's one that pretty much sets the stage for the future of the RE franchise thanks to the things that have happened to her over the years. After escaping Raccoon City, she went into hiding with Barry Burton and his family before eventually rejoining Chris in his mission to bring an end to Umbrella. After the fall of Umbrella, they joined the BSAA before Jill is thought to be dead after sacrificing herself to take out Wesker. The events of Resident Evil 5 in 2009 revealed that Jill is alive and that Wesker has used some sort of mind manipulation device to make her his personal assassin. Even though Jill was saved by Chris and Sheva, Jill became depressed and scarred from being controlled by Wesker for 3 years, as seen in the events of Death Island. This was the last time we saw Jill. The biggest reason why I highly doubt Capcom will kill Jill off anytime soon is because Death Island revealed that Jill ages slowly due to a side effect of her being infected with the T-virus by Nemesis. This is the perfect setup for Jill to become a recurring protagonist in the series without having to worry about aging, eliminating her from the front lines. Besides, Jill isn't the type of character that Capcom can just get away with killing her off screen, so yeah, she's absolutely the safest Raccoon City survivor in my opinion. Number 6, the Outbreak protagonist. For the next 2 entries on today's list, we'll be combining 2 different groups of Raccoon City survivors together. First, we are looking at the playable protagonists of the Resident Evil Outbreak games. This list includes Kevin Reitman, an RPD officer, Mark Wilkins, a security guard, Jim Chapman, a subway worker, George Hamilton, a doctor, David King, a mechanic, Yoko Suzuki, an Umbrella researcher, Cindy Lennox, a waitress, and Alyssa Ashcroft, a reporter. Obviously, we already talked about Alyssa earlier on today's list and how I don't think she's going to be included in that list due to the circumstances and timeline of her death. Before discussing the likelihood of each of the Outbreak survivors being the victims Leon mentioned in the trailer, let's talk about each of them and their last known whereabouts, which unfortunately most of these characters pretty much disappear after the events of the Outbreak games, so this is going to be interesting. While each of them can and probably do escape the city in various ways depending on which scenario you want to connect each one to, there's no confirmation of this outside of Alyssa Ashcroft, as both Requiem and Resident Evil 7 confirm she survived the events of Outbreak. As for the others, well, Kevin Reitman receiving an Easter egg in Resident Evil 3 Remake confirming him and what we assume are the other 7 playable protagonists, and the 2 victims in the Outbreak scenario are at a bar fighting off a horde of zombies. The only thing we might know, although this isn't officially confirmed as canon, is that Yoko, given her history with Umbrella as an ex-researcher, apparently assisted Alyssa with trying to expose Umbrella for their crimes. Now, it's this unknown factor in relation to each of these characters and the fact that they all appeared in a spin-off game that for the longest time was located in a gray area in terms of it being canon or not, that most fans, myself included, think that some or all of the victims Leon is referencing are Outbreak survivors. Now, if we are to work on this theory for a little bit, then we know that there are 7 survivors remaining outside of Alyssa, who we already established isn't one of the 6 victims Leon is referencing. Meaning that if these are the Outbreak survivors, then there's still 1 remaining that could be alive. If I had to make a guess on which Outbreak survivor would still be alive or vital to the plot of Requiem in some way, my money's on Yoko. Her involvement with Umbrella could be vital to deciphering what Elpis is, and if she did indeed work with Alyssa in trying to bring down Umbrella after the events of Raccoon City, she's immediately connected to the plot via Alyssa's death in my opinion. However, while I do think 1 or even 2 of the 6 victims are Outbreak survivors, my money on Sydney and George for some reason, I don't think all of them will be Outbreak survivors. Mostly because we've seen some of the bodies in Grace's reports, and the body in her report in the trailer doesn't really look like any of the Outbreak survivors. However, that doesn't mean that the rest of the victims can't be other different types of survivors of the Outbreak games that, I don't know, aren't playable characters, which brings me to the next entry on today's list. Number 7, the Outbreak NPCs. While Resident Evil Outbreak only has 8 canon playable characters, there's actually a long list of NPCs in the Outbreak games that, believe it or not, survived the Raccoon City Outbreak as well. Hell, there's files that hint towards hundreds, potentially thousands of people that made it out of Raccoon City before the city was destroyed. While we've never met most of those survivors, and Requiem will more than likely have the 6 victims be characters that we probably never heard of, Capcom has a golden opportunity to give us a ton of Easter eggs to the Outbreak games by making the victims Leon is referencing NPCs from the Outbreak games that may have survived the Raccoon City incident. Just to name a few, you have the RPD officer, Rita Phillips, the survivor that helped the Outbreak survivors escape the RPD station in desperate time scenario, firefighters Danny and Gil, who actually appear in multiple scenarios before eventually picking up some survivors in the decision scenario, a scenario that may play a major part in Resident Evil Requiem due to the daylight vaccine being synthesized in this scenario. And even Linda Baldwin, an ex-researcher for Umbrella that betrayed them to expose them to the world and even attempted to expose them before the Raccoon City outbreak. In fact, Linda Baldwin specifically, alongside Yoko, as mentioned earlier, testified against Umbrella in court and assisted Alyssa with her mission to bring Umbrella down. In my opinion, Linda Baldwin is arguably the best Easter egg that Capcom can use as one of the victims of Requiem. Now, there are actually a lot more characters like this I didn't even bring up in today's video, as the 2 Outbreak games have multiple NPCs that appear to make it out of the city before it's destroyed. We've also seen Capcom sort of tease Easter eggs in the form of Outbreak NPCs before. While not confirmed, there's a lot of fan theories that the 2 characters in the live action trailer for Requiem are actually Regan and Lily, 2 NPCs introduced in a side quest in the flashback scenario of Outbreak File number 2. Now, their fate is left unknown after the 2 of them reunite with each other, but fans have already started to speculate hard that it was them in the Requiem live action trailer, and if that is indeed the case, man oh man, that opens the door for Requiem to have a few more Easter eggs like this for us in the most tragic way possible. Number 8, Hunk. The last survivor that I want to bring up in today's video that could be one of the 6 Raccoon City survivors mentioned to be dead in the most recent trailer is the Grim Reaper himself, Hunk. Hunk was the leader of the USS strike team that Umbrella sent in to retrieve Birkin and his G-Virus in Raccoon City. In fact, it was Hunk's team that ultimately caused the Raccoon City outbreak as they fired on Birkin, fatally injuring him and forcing him to take the G-Virus himself. This led to him attacking the team and releasing the T-Virus in the sewers, infecting rats that would then contaminate the water in Raccoon City, causing the outbreak. As for Hunk, well, after the fall of Umbrella, we don't really know where he ended up. Rumors say that he became a mercenary for hire, similar to Ada Wong. In fact, there's plenty of theories out there that suggest that Hunk could have worked for the HCF for a time, Wesker's task force for the rival company to Umbrella, but none of this is ever confirmed. That being said, Hunk is a character that absolutely makes no sense to be one of the 6 victims. For one, we don't even know his real name or what he looks like now. So how the hell will we even know it's him when he's revealed? 2, the mystery surrounding Hunk is part of his charm, and messing that up with an off-screen death just doesn't feel right for me. And 3, I think there's so much more that Capcom can do with Hunk as a character. Because of his origins and future are a mystery to us, there's so many different ways that Capcom can bring him back in the future, and I don't think they'll waste it on an off-screen death. My hope is that it'll be revealed that he works for Blue Umbrella or even the Connections. Regardless, Hunk is another one of those survivors that I think are almost guaranteed to be safe, if I'm being honest with you guys. Which brings me to the end of my list. So after breaking down every single survivor of the Raccoon City that we know about, who do I think are the victims? Well, most of them I think will just be Easter eggs to Resident Evil Outbreak characters, whether that is in the form of playable characters like George or a Cindy, or in the form of NPCs like Linda or Rita. I think Capcom will use some of these deaths as Easter eggs to those characters. However, for whatever reason, something tells me that at least one of these characters will be a major death that impacts Leon and the heroes of the series so far. As for who, well, my money is on 2 different characters, Claire Redfield and Carlos Oliveira. I think I lean towards it being Claire because of the importance that her character has to both Leon, one of the main protagonists of the game, and Sherry, who I strongly believe is in the game. However, I don't think we'll know about it until later in the game when Leon has a flashback sequence of the first Raccoon City Survivor being killed by the Elpis virus, explaining why Leon and Sherry are so invested in uncovering the Umbrella Curse and Raccoon City's dark secret. But that does it for this episode of Nerd Games. Do you think any of the Raccoon City survivors that we know about are one of the 6 victims Leon mentioned in the trailer, or do you think they are all just random people that we've probably never heard of? Also, who on this list do you think is most likely to be one of the victims? Hit up the comments and let me know your thoughts down below. Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more survival horror content. Also, leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Games. Take care.